1964, the year...
The Cardinals won the pennant! The Cardinals won the pennant! The Cardinals won the pennant!
I wish John and I were old enough to truly appreciate what was going on in the baseball world in 1964. But I know I wasn't. I wasn't aware that Harry Caray and Jack Buck were in the booth. You heard Harry Caray at the beginning of this episode, that they were in the booth chronicling this legendary team. I wasn't aware that the Cardinals were 13 games out of first place at one point, and that they struggled mightily to close the gap. And in the closing weeks, there was a three-way race with the Cardinals, the Phillies, and the Reds. It all came down to the last day where the Cardinals won the pennant by one game. And there was no division race. There were no divisions until 1969. There was no wild card spot to fight for. You either won the pennant or you went home. This episode will recap the members of that 1964 team. Yes, we'll mention the Brocks, the Gibsons, the McCarvers, the Boyers, and so forth. But we'll also take a look at the other gentlemen who played a role in one of the most exciting seasons in St. Louis Cardinal history. Welcome to St. Louis Cardinals Beyond the HOF, saluting unsung heroes, with your hosts Tom Nance
and John Crust.
It's August 22nd, 2024. Not happy with the Cardinals' current situation? Well, your hosts, Tom Nance and my partner, John Crost, we're not particularly pleased either with the way the season has gone. But we have a question for you. Think you could do better? What if you were asked to submit your 5-year plan to success? And no, you do not have an unlimited budget. Where would you start? Could you lay out a 5-year plan that outlines your building blocks for success? Yeah, John, it's understandable that current Cardinal fans like you and I are somewhat disgruntled. But before, maybe someone asks to back up the truck and ask for wholesale dismemberment of the team, before we demand that heads roll and that the front office be burned to the ground, think about the challenges of putting together a winning team. There's a lot of elements involved.
Oh, gosh, yes, even more so today because of free agency.
Right? A lot of moving parts, scouting, training, evaluation of current players, the health, the age of current and prospective players, trying to get two-way players, the player development in your own system, and then the money factor.
Oh, gosh, yes. And just being able to, once you get the players, even if you get them developed, being able to hold on to them.
Right.
And things like that. You've got only so many years of guaranteeing a player in your organization.
Indeed. So, yeah, I think that always it tempers my comments or feelings about a situation. Well, what would you do? Well, I don't know. Tough calls. But,
well, yeah, definitely. It's not an easy thing. It's not like the quote unquote good old days, when players stayed with the team, but it wasn't always out of loyalties because they weren't allowed to move to other teams that easily. So, the notion of players not being loyal, well, that's not quite the whole story.
Well, this episode chronicles the 5-year plan of Bing Devine for the most part, because the 1964 roster build, which turned out into obviously a great success for the Cardinals, started at least 5 years back with many of the players. And so this episode that you've put together and we get to spotlight chronicles the events leading up to the 64, all the players and the smaller pieces coming together to create a World Series championship team.
A big part of it really was Bing Devine. And, he was a man who assembled the team. And this is in the days when they didn't have that first-year amateur player draft either.
Right.
So you had to go out and sign the players.
And literally, we're talking about getting in a vehicle and going out and visiting high schools and colleges and hitting the back roads, digging these guys up.
Exactly. And, you had to make sure your scouts were accurate. They were evaluating what they saw correctly, and so it was, as a whole, didn't have a lot of things. You didn't have video or films to base things off of like you do today, and other such stuff.
And all those stats readily available. Wow.
Exactly.
That is something to think about. I was going to say, with this episode, when we see a picture of the 1964 Cardinals, most people are going to be able to pick out the Lou Brocks and the Bob Gibsons and so on. But now we can put some names to faces after listening to this episode. We'll know who a Bob Skinner is, or a Carl Warwick, or a Ron Taylor. We'll be, oh yeah, these guys were key players too. They were important parts of the recipe for success.
Exactly. Some shined a bit more during the regular season. Some shined in the playoffs.
Indeed.
But nonetheless, they were there. And that's the whole thing. And it's how, and some of it, sort of looking through it all, is how baseball is indeed a game of, in a sense, streaks. Sometimes extended streaks.
You bet.
For good or bad.
I was just listening to something earlier. It said the Cardinals were 13 games out of the first place at one point in the '64 season. So, talk about streaks. Talk about it being a long haul versus a short haul. Fascinating. Yeah. Well, listen.
Oh yeah, that was the more amazing thing. And there was only one playoff spot in each league too.
There's only one what?
Playoff spot in each league.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. No divisions, no wild cards. It's the all or nothing, pal.
Exactly. Oh, you won 100 games? Well, you didn't finish first. Too bad.
You were really good, but not good enough. All right.
But yeah, you see where then there'll be some years where you get like 3 or 4 teams that end up in the 91 season, and but they're all in it to the end of the season. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, great example wasn't the Cardinals in 2000? Was it 2006 or 11? They only had 90-some wins and went on to win it all.
Yeah, 2011 they won 90 games, and they were a wild card team. And they had that amazing finish. Of course, the Braves had a sort of collapse, but in a sense. But
yeah,
that's what you got to do. You've got to win the games and just let everything else take care of itself.
Well, and you just also described the '64 season. The Phillies had to collapse. The Reds had to tail away in order for the Cardinals to sneak in and get that pennant win.
That's why they call baseball a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, you betcha. Well, let's meet some of these players.
Yes, definitely.
We'll do that in this spotlight on the 1964 roster build. We're going to give quick snapshots of quite a few of the players that were part of that World Series team. Here's what John has put together for us. How the Cardinals put together their 1964 team. The process of the Cardinals building to a World Series championship team in 1964 was indeed a process, as this was the time before the draft, which MLB wouldn't institute until 1965. Sources for this story is twice the usual number of suspects, as it not only includes Wikipedia, Saber.org, and Baseball Reference, but also the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, October 1964, that was written by David Halberstam, and the AP. You'll hear sprinkled throughout audio excerpts from actual broadcasts of 1964 critical games. Enjoy the voices of Jack Buck and Harry Caray. They're taken from a record album entitled St. Louis Cardinals, World Champions, 1964. The manager who led the Redbirds to their storied success was Johnny Keane, who came to the majors as a coach in 1959 after being a manager in the Cardinals organization for a number of years, starting in 1938, with their minor league teams at various levels, and generally being successful, as his 17-year record was 1,357 wins versus 1,166 losses. Keane would become the Cards manager just past the halfway mark in 1961. The team went 47-33 under him and finished fifth. The fifth-place finish was among all National League teams, as divisions would not be created until 1969. The team the following 2 seasons went 84-78 and 1, yes, they had ties back then, and then 93 and 69, finishing 6th and 2nd, respectively. Keene was instrumental in helping the team bridge racial divides, as the black players knew he would give them an equal and fair chance and would have their backs. He was Bob Gibson's first manager in professional baseball. Bob knew Keene well and communicated to the other black players on the team that John was truly a good guy who did not see color. Bing Devine was the general manager and was the one who promoted Keene to a coach in the majors. They had worked together for a few years at the Cardinals AAA team in Rochester and became good friends. Bing was the one who helped engineer the trade for Brock and asked Keene what he thought of the trade. Keene was all for it, as he saw Brock's potential. Devine would make other key signings that will be highlighted in this episode. Even though Devine was replaced by Bob Howsam on the 17th of August in '64, the Cardinals were essentially put together by Bing. Devine would also revamp the Mets organization, which was a key to the 1969 Miracle Mets. Bing's philosophy was to get input and give credit to others, including the managers. His credo to making a good trade had 4 points. Number 1, you've got to need the player. 2, you've got to have good reports from your scouts and talent evaluators. 3, you've got to have the guts to make the deal. 4, you've got to get lucky. A good deal of the '64 team construction came in 1959. A great example of that is Tim McCarver, who would be signed that year as an amateur free agent and play mostly in the minors with a call up to the majors in September for 8 games. In '62, he spent the entire season with the Cards' AAA team in Atlanta and did well. He was promoted for good to the majors in 1963 and was a starter most of the time. It was that season that McCarver showed his relative speed for a catcher when he hit an inside-the-park grand slam, his first grand slam as well, at the Polo Grounds. By 1964, McCarver was the undisputed starter. Here's a short audio clip of Harry calling one of McCarver's home runs.
The honorary mayor of Memphis, Tennessee, Tim McCarver, gave us a second-inning lead.
2 balls and a strike. Here's a pitch. There's a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is a home run. What did I say about one on the roof? McCarver just hit his 9th home run of the year. The Cardinals lead 2-0.
At first base, the Cardinals acquired Bill White in a trade just prior to the start of the 1959 season because he lost his starting job with the Giants due to military service, the Giants acquiring Orlando Cepeda, who had become a fan favorite. However, as Musial was now at first base for the Cards, White was playing mostly in the outfield with some time at first to give Musial a rest. In 1960, White would be made the regular starter at first base and started accumulating gold gloves as a result, 1960 through 1966. He finished 3rd in the MVP voting in 1964. Oddly enough, when White was traded to the Phillies prior to the '66 season, the Cardinals had acquired Cepeda from the Giants to replace him. Here's Jack Buck calling one of Bill White's homers.
The pitch is made by Boozer, and there's a drive to deep right center field. Way back, near the clock. Home run for Bill White into the seats. Well, Bill White was looking for a ball to pull. He got a fastball, and he drilled it into the pavilion seats. Just below the clock, beyond the 3:54 mark, and back about 5 rows to put the Cardinals out in front 4-2.
The Cardinals acquired second baseman Javier in a trade with the Pirates early in the '60 season, and he immediately became a starter. He was a linchpin with Dick Groat when it came to executing double plays. And he could also deliver with the bat.
Javier digs in. The stretch. And the pitch. Ground ball up the middle. Center field base hit. White around second. On his way to third. The Cardinals have runners at first and third.
At shortstop, the Cardinals acquired Dick Groat from the Pirates in a trade just after the 1962 season. He was an all-star, both in 63 and 64. Groat was not considered particularly talented defensively, but he developed his defensive skills to a high level, and that's why he served well for the Cardinals at shortstop. Groat had a good batting average of .292, a solid on-base percentage of .335, and while only one home run, he did hit 35 doubles and 6 triples, so he had extra base, warning track power, and contributed often at the plate. His durability was also a strength as he played in 161 games, the third season in a row he played at least 158 games in a season. Ken Boyer was the star at third base. Well known for his defensive skills, he too could contribute offensively.
And then Kenny Boyer came to the plate. Have you ever heard anyone say about Boyer, "Oh, well, he can't get the big hit"?
Now the stretch. And the pitch to Boyer. A hot shot. Left field. Base hit. The tying run is in. Here's another man racing for third. There goes Boyer to second with a double. The Cardinals have tied it up.
Boyer was signed by the Cardinals prior to the 1949 season. He would take 6 years to make it to the majors and become a full-time starter after just 24 games. He would man the hot corner with occasional stints at shortstop or center field, except in 57 when he was used more often in center field, where he was a little bit better than league average. However, after the 59 season, he was never used anywhere else while with the Cardinals. Boyer would win the National League MVP in 64, playing in all 162 games with a .295 batting average, .365 on-base percentage, and a slugging percentage of .489 with 30 doubles, 10 triples, 24 home runs, and a league-leading 119 RBIs. His grand slam in Game 4 is the stuff of legends. He had been a Gold Glove recipient from 1958 to 61 and again in 63. In left field, the Cardinals had acquired Lou Brock in that famous trade with the Cubs. He hit team highs in batting average, .348, on-base percentage, .387, slugging percentage, .527, steals, 33, second in triples, and tied for third in home runs with 12. He did all of that in just 103 games with the Cards and finished 10th in the voting for the National League MVP. He was obviously a factor to be dealt with his bat and his speed, but he could also make the occasional stellar defensive play.
Slow ball swung on. A drive back to left. Way back is Brock. He jumps. Holy cow! Did he make the catch or not? Yeah, he's got the ball. The game is over. Lou Brock, a spectacular leap through the air. Boy, he jumped higher than the fence. He lost his cap. And very nonchalantly, he didn't show the ball at all. He walked over and picked up his cap, and it was only then that everybody realized that he had caught the ball. A spectacular catch to end the game with.
Curt Flood patrolled center field. He was a gifted athlete who was acquired in a trade with the Cincinnati Reds just after the 1957 season. It wouldn't be until the 62 season that he became a full-time starter and became a Gold Glove recipient from 1963 through 68. In right field, Mike Shannon received a permanent call-up just before the halfway mark in 64. He was born and raised in St. Louis, was a high school star athlete at CBC High School, and attended the University of Missouri in Columbia. He helped stabilize the position defensively for the Cards. His arm helped him earn 7 assists in just half a season. The Cardinals had some key bench players as well, and used several as defensive replacements. Bob Uecker, despite a paltry .198 batting average, had an on-base percentage of .315, slightly above the league average of .311, and would use his fine defensive skills to catch the knuckleballer Barney Schultz. It was this experience that Uecker got his material for jokes about catching knuckleballs. When it came to throwing out players that were stealing, Uecker caught 8 of 21 base runners for a 38% success rate, just below the league average of 40%, but significantly better than McCarver's 29% success rate. Johnny Lewis had been a starter in right field for a while, but an injury and the emergence of Mike Shannon limited his playing time. Still, he had a .324 on-base percentage, which is a solid stat for a bench player and was above league average, making him a great pinch hitter. Bob Skinner, an all-star with the 1960 Pirates World Series championship team, had been acquired from the Reds in a trade 2 months into the 1964 season. With the Cardinals acquiring Brock, his playing time was limited, but he still had a batting average of .271 and an on-base percentage of .333 with the Cards, both significantly above league average and making him a nice bat off the bench, as in this example.
On a sultry mid-season Friday night in St. Louis.
That was a dandy, all right. We trailed 7-1 early in the ballgame, but instead of writing it off, the Redbirds came bouncing back, and after 3 hours and 15 minutes of baseball, we had moved to within a run, had runners at second and third with 2 out in the ninth, and had Bob Skinner at the plate against ex-Cardinal Bobby Miller.
Into the windup he goes. Here it is. A base hit. One run is in. Here's the winning run. The Cardinals win. The Cardinals win. The Cardinals win. Holy cow. The Cardinals win it. 8-7.
Without that one, who knows where our guys would have spent mid-October.
Now to one of our favorite unsung heroes, Carl Warwick. He was a solid defensive outfielder and a good pinch hitter, having been reacquired by the Cardinals prior to the '64 season after being traded to the Colt 45s in 1962. We spotlighted him in Episode 3, so we won't go deep into him here. He played a critical part in 2 of the Cardinals' wins in the series, driving in the go-ahead to stay run in Game 1, and sparked the rally in the top of the 6th in Game 4 that culminated in Boyer's grand slam. As for the starting rotation, the core was quality, with Bob Gibson, Curt Simmons, and Ray Sadecki. Bob Gibson developed into the ace of the staff in '64 as he continued to improve overall and mastered control of his 2 fastballs and slider. His performance in the World Series would cement his stardom as he would be named the MVP of the series. Gibson was one of 3 legendary sports stars from Omaha, along with Gale, the Kansas Comet Sayers, and Marlin, the Magician Briscoe, the first black player to be named the regular starting quarterback by an NFL, AFL team in '68. Briscoe was mentored by Josh Gibson, Bob's older brother. In high school, Bob's favorite sport was basketball, and he played mainly catcher and shortstop as a baseball player. In college, he played catcher, outfield, third base, and pitcher, excelling at the plate, in the field, and on the mound. In his senior year, both the Lakers and the NBA and the Cardinals, along with several other MLB teams, expressed interest in him. Only the Cardinals were willing to work with him so he could play both sports. The Cardinals in baseball, starting at AAA Omaha, managed then by Johnny Keane in June of '57, and Gibson was with the Harlem Globetrotters during the baseball's offseason. Keane had Gibson focus on being a pitcher, and Gibson said of Keane, "He had no prejudices concerning my color. He was the closest thing to a saint that I ever came across in baseball." Curt Simmons was a 35-year-old pitcher who'd been acquired by the Cards as a free agent after the Phillies released him a month into the 1960 season. The Phillies would come to regret that decision by 1964 for obvious reasons. He had been struggling that season, and the 2 previous ones, but found renewed vigor, which reflected in his performances. While '64 was a bit of a down year for him, his performance was still good overall. And while he pitched well in the World Series, he had a no decision in Game 2 as the Cards lost it in the bottom of the 9th when Barney Schultz, one of the heroes of the '64 regular season, surrendered a home run to Mickey Mantle. He was credited with the loss in Game 6 as the team fell behind to stay in the top of the 6th, even though he only gave up 3 runs in 6 1/3 innings, and the Cards ending up losing 8-3. Simmons was a member of the Phillies Whiz Kids of 1950, but was not allowed to play in the World Series. His National Guard unit had been called up to active duty, even though he was on a 10-day pass from the Army. Commissioner Happy Chandler ruled him ineligible to play, and the Yankees would go on to sweep the Phillies. So he was thrilled to be finally playing and pitching well in a World Series. Ray Sadecki was a lefty, and the third starter, leading the team in wins for 64 with 20 wins against 11 losses. Gibson would go 19-12 and Simmons 18-9. He had been signed by the Cardinals prior to the 1958 season and was called up to the majors a month into the 60 season. 1962 saw him demoted back to the minors, but it was good for him. His attitude improved, and he matured as a person, and it showed in 1963. In 64, he even admitted that he wasn't pitching well enough to win 20 games. It was more of a matter of the bats bailing him out. As he put it, "It's only natural," everybody reflects back. "You won 20 games. That must have been a great year. You must have been a great pitcher." Well, it's not necessarily true. I won ball games that year where they pinch hit from me in the fifth, and they'd get the hit that put you ahead, then the bullpen would hold them. From May 11th through July 11th, Sadecki went 10-2 in 12 starts, but had an ERA of 4.05. Then, from July 26th through September 29th, he went 10-2 with 3 no decisions in 15 starts. However, he was much better in this stretch with an ERA of 2.38. In other words, he truly earned his wins during this streak, and at a time the Cardinals needed him to come through, as it helped them pull into the race for the pennant. He would struggle in the World Series and started 2 games, but it was his first hot streak. The team's bats would bail him out both times here, too. Roger Craig was used as both a starter and reliever, as he would appear in 39 games and start 19 of them. At the end of the 1963 season, he would be rescued from the Mets, who would finish 40 games behind the Cardinals in 64, having pitched for the Mets in their first 2 seasons. In 64, he was okay as a starter with an ERA of 3.60, but he did well as a reliever with an ERA of 2.20. However, from August 12th through September 27th, he was used solely as a starter, making 8 starts and had an ERA of 3.09. which is much better than his win-loss record of 2-4 would indicate. He would face one batter and get the last Yankee batter out in Game 2 of the World Series, an 8-3 loss for the Cardinals. However, after Ray Sadecki in Game 4 gave up 2 doubles and 2 singles in the bottom of the first for 3 runs, 2 earned, but got an out when Mantle tried to extend a single into a double and was thrown out at second base. Craig was then put in and pitched 4 2/3 innings, giving up just 2 hits and 3 walks. The Cards would then score 4 runs in the top of the 6th and give Craig a win. Craig would get his 3rd World Series ring as a player, having been a member of the Dodgers in 55 and 59. He also was not a bad batter for a pitcher that year. At the plate, Roger had career highs in hits with 10, batting average of .208, and on-base percentage of .283. Very good for a pitcher. He had 1 double and 3 RBIs, both tied for career highs, and 5 walks, second best in his career. Be sure to check out our previous episode that spotlights Roger. The episode title is No Stranger to the World Series. In that episode, you can learn how he acquired 5 World Series rings. For the bullpen, let's start with Miguel "Mike" Cuellar. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he became an eventual Cy Young Award winner. In 64, he was 27 years old and a rookie. Cuellar was twice tried as a starter for brief stretches during 1964, but didn't fare well, except for one start in August when he threw a complete game and gave up only 2 runs. His ERA as a starter in 7 games was 6.13, and he was 2-5. But in 25 appearances as a reliever, his ERA was 2.53, and he went 3-0 with 4 saves. Cuellar would be traded to the Astros 2 months into the 65 season with Ron Taylor, becoming an all-star starter with them. The Astros would then trade him to the Orioles prior to the 1969 season, where he blossomed, winning the Cy Young Award in 69 and becoming a 3-time All-Star. Another key reliever was Ron Taylor, who had his share of wins as a reliever. Taylor was acquired from Cleveland shortly before the 1962 season. He struggled early in the season, but turned things around as the pennant race heated up. From May 31st through September 12th, his ERA was 2.78 and generally kept the opposing bats quiet. He pitched 68 innings over 41 games during that stretch, which was critical for the Cardinals. In the World Series, he relieved Roger Craig to start the 6th inning and earned a 4-inning save to help the Cards to a 4-3 win in Game 4, giving up just 1 base on balls and striking out 2. His experience in the 1964 season no doubt allowed him to help the 1969 Miracle Mets, whom he was a member of during their equally amazing finish to win the NL East Division. He had a fine regular season performance and then really turned it on as a reliever in the playoffs. Bob Humphreys, who was acquired from the Tigers prior to the 1963 season, was a 28-year-old rookie. He would be called up from the minors on July 2nd and appear in 28 games, pitch 42 2/3 innings, and have an ERA of 2.53. He definitely played a significant role in middle relief and also finished up 10 games. He made 1 appearance in the World Series in the 9th inning of Game 6 in an 8-3 loss, but he didn't allow a base runner and recorded a strikeout. Gordy Richardson, a 26-year-old rookie, had been signed by the Cardinals prior to the 1957 season, then went to the Angels just after the 1962 season in the Rule 5 draft, who then returned him to the Cardinals just prior to the 63 season. Gordy would be called up on July 26th, just a week after his birthday. He would appear in 19 games, 6 of them as starts, and throw for a total of 47 innings. His first 3 games were starts, and he literally started his career with a bang as he threw a complete game, scattered 5 hits and 3 walks, gave up just 1 earned run, struck out 5, and what would end up being a key win over the Phillies. He would be mostly a reliever after struggling in his next 2 starts, but would make a start on August 16th and 2 more on September 20th and 25th. However, he continued to struggle as a starter. His ERA starter was 2.81. He had issues with consistency and not being able to go deep into games. However, in his 13 relief appearances, he had an ERA of 1.20 and a save, including a critical one on September 30th against the Phillies, in which he inherited a runner but retired the last 2 Phillies batters.
Another lefty, rookie Gordon Richardson, relieves Simmons when the Phillies threatened mildly in the late going. Here's how it ended.
2 balls, 2 strikes. From the belt, the pitch. Here it is. A bouncing ball. This should do it. The Cardinals are in first place. The Redbirds win it 8-5. Gordon Richardson being congratulated as Bobby Wine bounced to Grote, who tossed to Javier for the force out. And now the pressure has been put on by the Cardinals. The Cardinals have taken over first place.
The Phillies must have hated to face him at that point, as he blanked them on September 9th as well in the bottom of the 9th in a tie game, one in which the Phillies would lose in the 11th. In 3 appearances against the Phillies, the 1 start and 2 in relief, he pitched a total of 10 2/3 innings, giving up just 5 hits, 3 walks, 1 run that was earned while striking out 6, earning a win, a save, and helping the game go into extra innings in which the Cardinals would eventually win. In the World Series, he pitched twice, each for a third of an inning. As fate would have it, his appearances had little impact on the game's results. His finest moments had been delivered in his 3 critical games against the Phillies, especially the 2 in September. For a more in-depth look at Gordy, we spotlight him in Episode 5 and our 2-part interview with him in Episodes 6 and 7. Last but certainly not least, and a huge reason why the Cardinals won the pennant, Barney Schultz. Schultz was a knuckleball pitcher and had only 1 good season prior in 1961 with the Cubs, acquired by the Cardinals in mid-season in 1963. It was here that Johnny Keane helped develop Schultz's skills. He started 1964 in the minors with the Cards' AAA affiliate Jacksonville in the International League as a player-coach. He was dominant in a manner he had never been before, as his ERA was 1.05. Then, on August 1st, with the Cardinals slowly clawing their way back into the pennant race, Schultz gets called up just 2 weeks before his 38th birthday. While his win-loss record was 1-3, he would record 14 saves, which is good enough to place him 5th, even though he was in the majors for only 2 months. His ERA was 1.64. In the last month of the season, he would be the only pitcher to relieve Bob Gibson, which he did twice. He would appear in 30 of the Cardinals' last 60 games of the season and pitch 49 1/3 innings. From September 25th through the 29th, he appeared in all 5 games. While being a knuckleball pitcher does make it easier to throw more consecutive games, this was near the end of the season, and he had his heaviest workload in 3 years, combining his minor and major league innings pitched. Considering his age and the emotional and mental stress he was under, it is phenomenal that he pitched 7 innings, gave up just 1 hit, 1 walk, and no runs.
And again, the call went out to Barney Schultz. And Jack, what a job he did in those final few days.
On that occasion, he worked beautifully through the 7th and 8th. We were sweating our ball game out and keeping an eye on the Reds as Schultz towed the rubber in the 9th.
Pete Rose is the hitter with a runner on first and 2 out on the bottom of the 9th at Cincinnati. 3 balls, 2 strikes. Here's the signal given. Barney Schultz winds. Here's the pitch to Triandas now. He struck him out, swinging. Triandas goes down swinging. 2 more and it'll all be over.
Johnny Callison was next.
1 ball, no strike. Here's the pitch on the way. A high fly ball, deep left center field. Flood going out. Brock is there. Lou's got it. 2 out. That's 2 gone.
And it all ended on a high note.
Here's a pitch. A bouncing ball to Boyer. He's got it. Here's a throw. Cardinals win it. And look at those Redbirds bouncing around. The Cardinals have won their ball game, 4-2. Pittsburgh has won. Pittsburgh won this ball game. 2-0. It's over. Pittsburgh has just beat the Reds 2-0. The National League race is in a tie. Holy cow. Never has it been a more thrilling moment. Within 15 seconds after the Cardinals won, Mazeroski threw out Ruiz, and the Pirates shut out the Reds 2-0. The National League race is all tied up.
So Barney really came through in September. However, in the World Series, outside of Game 1, in which he went 3 innings and only gave up 1 run, he was obviously spent. In his next 3 appearances, he managed to only get 3 outs and surrendered 5 hits and 2 walks for 7 runs. He was tagged by the great Mickey Mantle with a walk-off home run on the first pitch he threw in Game 3. But be that as it may, without Barney, the Cardinals would not have won the pennant. You can hear more about Barney Schultz by listening to our very first episode, as he is our very first unsung hero. So there you have the pieces of a championship team that were put together over a period of mostly 5 years. Bing Devine's recipe for making a good trade was able to cook up a World Series trophy for Cardinal Nation. We hope you enjoyed finding out about all the supporting characters in this storied success. So there we have snapshots of the various members of that storied success of the 64 Cardinals. And their success continued. Obviously, much of it, many of those players went on to success with the 67 and 68 pennant-winning teams. But I also want to mention that a number of those players went on to other teams or other avenues of life to be successful. So it was like success breeds success. Like Ron Taylor ended up with the 69 Mets, experiencing another amazing run at the pennant and eventually earning himself another World Series rings. And of course, he had success as a physician with the Toronto team, a couple of World Series rings there. But we were talking a little bit ago off air, John, about Bing Devine having success after he was actually let go from the Cardinals during the 64 season. He was instrumental, obviously, in putting together all those players we just talked about or just read about. But he was also very successful in developing the Mets into that. Well, tell us about that.
Well, yeah, it was, a funny quick story about Bing Devine is that after being named Sporting News Executive of the Year for baseball in 63, he was again named it in 64. So I think that was a dig against August Busch. But yeah, I mean, they recognize who really put that team together.
Right.
But yeah, and so how he started, and he worked his way. He was with the Cardinals organization for a while and worked his way up, and then it's that credo of making a good trade. You've got to need the player, you've got to have the good reports from your scouts and talent evaluators, you've got to have the guts to make the deal, and you've got to get lucky.
Indeed. We started the podcast off by suggesting what would your 5-year plan be, but you got to be lucky no matter what.
That's true. No matter how much it seems like can't miss, the guy's got to not be injury prone.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to work out. He doesn't have that one freakish injury that ends his career,
or have the inexplicable slump that we're seeing some of the Cardinal players go through right now. And
it's a tough thing to do. And the thing is that Bing Devine had a lot of success when he went to the Mets. Yeah, the Mets were a joke those first 3 years of existence. He came in, pretty much revamped their whole system. I mean, for scouting, player development, and things like that. He would trade for players too, and he got not just getting Ron Taylor, but and drafting Tom Seaver, which ended up being one of the greatest draft, because that was in the first year of the amateur draft.
Wow.
And that, needless to say, that paid off pretty big.
Yeah. Well done.
But he also traded for players like Jerry Grote, Tommy G, and Art Shamsky, who were critical for the Mets' '69 season as well, and hired Gil Hodges to be the manager before he left.
Fascinating. So Bing Devine, he really is a baseball genius.
Yeah. It was he really did it, and his second go around wasn't quite as well. He did get the Cardinals some decent seasons, but it just was one of those time frames that it was just not the Cardinals' decade during the 70s.
Right. And we had people like Roger Craig and Orlando Cepeda, Mike Cuellar go on and have successful careers also, but they were a part of the Cardinal organization in their early years, and I'm sure that played a role in their success.
I can't remember who said it, but it's a critical thing in helping a team become a championship team that gets them above is having that player with a championship series experience.
Yeah, that mindset.
Yeah, because he knows what it's like to be there. He understands the pressures better. And it's like saying, here, I've got a ring. You guys want one too? But that's a motivator.
You betcha.
When you think about it.
Yeah. We've walked this road before. Let me show you how it's done.
Exactly. And it's just nice, if you have that one player, especially like a pitcher who can tell other pitchers, this is how you have to mentally prepare yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can tell the batters too. And the batter says, look, this is what pitchers are going to be doing. This is what you have to, do to counter that.
This is what you got to do to be prepared.
And Roger Craig, became one of the best pitching coaches. And his ability as a pitching coach was key to the '84 Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
He developed Jack Morris, into, Captain Jack. He developed him into a great pitcher. He also got, I think it was Willie Hernandez. He helped him with his career. And Willie Hernandez as a great reliever and closer.
And then,
so it's not just as players, but as a coach.
Right. And continue passing on that wisdom and learned experience. And it can sometimes show up off the field. We've spotlighted a couple of players, Gordy Richardson and Carl Warwick, who left the game and went on to very successful careers as a farmer, as a real estate developer. They took that winning attitude, that winning mindset, and translated it right into their own activities off the field. Once a winner, always a winner, right?
Yeah, that's true. And just in their lives too, they were winners. With their families and all that. They had that moment, and they're like, my career's not going to go anywhere near where it was at, but I've had that moment in life, so they could retire without a regret.
Mm-hmm. And walk away with that confidence of being successful.
Yeah, I think you hit a nail right on the head.
And we're going to try and hit the nail on the head in our next episode. We did have fun interviewing Gordy Richardson, and we hope you enjoyed those episodes as much as John and I did. We also landed an interview with the Warwick family, and that's going to be in our next episode, where we're going to spend the majority of time with Carl's wife talking about the female perspective, the wives' perspective of the 64 season and her experiences from her perspective of dealing with the road tripping and taking care of the family and the ups and downs of baseball. We had a lot of fun with that, didn't we, John?
Oh, gosh, yeah. It was interesting to have, the baseball wife's perspective. And it's a lot different than it is today because there wasn't the money back then that there is now.
Right.
So, it took a lot.
A lot of pressure, a lot of difficulties. Yeah, there's some. Nancy tells some stories that just made me laugh and shake my head because you and I are both parents. We're like, holy cow, how do you deal with that family situation when that happens? Like, wow, talk about performing under pressure. She had to do that just as much as any player.
That's true. That's true. And, and especially because a lot of times, the players can't be there because he's got a job to do.
Yeah. The wives are on their own holding it together. Amazing. Well, we'll hear more about that in that next episode.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I had as much, that to me was as much fun as doing the Gordy interview.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for listening to this episode of St. Louis Cardinals Beyond the HOF, saluting unsung heroes. Please share this podcast with others and subscribe so that you are alerted when episodes are published. Our episodes will be published bi-weekly on the second and fourth Monday of each month. Leave a review when possible. We welcome your feedback by email about how we're doing and what bench jockeys you'd like to see featured. Our email address is TommyJohnSTLCardinalsPodcast@gmail.com. It's all lowercase, Tommy, Tommy, John, Jon, STL, Cardinals Podcast@gmail.com. Go Cards!